My wife always said I worked too much. She convinced me that she valued my efforts, that it was all for our future. And then I accidentally found her second phone, and realized that all this time she was waiting until I earned enough money to leave and leave me with nothing. I stared at the skyline of Chicago from my corner office, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the glass towers. It was almost 9 p.m., and I was still at my desk, reviewing investment portfolios for clients who trusted me with millions. My phone buzzed with a text from my wife, Rebecca. "Don't forget, Emma has a recital tomorrow at 6. Try to make it this time." I sighed, feeling the familiar pang of guilt. It had been the third school event I'd missed this month. But the Harrington account was too important, and if I closed it, the commission would finally let us finish the kitchen renovation Rebecca had been planning for months. "I'll be there," I texted back, even though I knew it might be a promise I couldn't keep. Rebecca and I had been married for 12 years. We met in college. She was studying art history while I was grinding through finance courses. Everyone thought we were mismatched, the free-spirited artist and the buttoned-up numbers guy. But we balanced each other out. At least, that's what I thought. After Emma was born, I threw myself into my career at Meridian Investments. The hours were brutal, but the payoff seemed worth it. Each promotion meant a better life for my family, a bigger house in the suburbs, private school for Emma, the security that my own parents never had. "You're killing yourself for that company," Rebecca would say, massaging my shoulders as I reviewed spreadsheets at our dining table. "But I understand. You're building our future." Her understanding was what kept me going on the nights when I missed dinner, when I came home to find Emma already asleep, when vacations were interrupted by urgent client calls. Rebecca would smile and say, "It's okay, James. We're in this together." I believed her. The next evening, I managed to slip out of a meeting early to make it to Emma's recital. I sat in the back row, still in my suit, as my 10-year-old daughter played Chopin on the piano. Rebecca was in the front row, recording with her phone. She didn't see me come in. Afterward, in the school hallway, Emma ran to me, her face lighting up. "Dad! You came!" She hugged me tight, and I felt a rush of love so intense it almost hurt. Rebecca approached more slowly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Well, look who made it," she said, her tone light but something else lingering beneath. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, wrapping an arm around her waist. She stiffened slightly before relaxing into my embrace. That weekend, Rebecca suggested I clean out the garage while she took Emma to her friend's birthday party. It wasn't how I'd planned to spend my rare Saturday off, but she insisted it would be therapeutic for me to do something physical after all those hours at a desk. So there I was, sorting through boxes of old clothes and forgotten sports equipment, when I knocked over one of Rebecca's old handbags. It hit the concrete floor with a thud that seemed too heavy for an empty purse. Curious, I picked it up. That's when I found it, a sleek black phone I'd never seen before. As I held it, the screen lit up with a notification. Before it faded to black, I caught a glimpse of a name, Baby. My heart began to race. This wasn't Rebecca's usual phone. I knew that one, I paid the bill every month. This was something else entirely. I stood in the dusty garage, the phone heavy in my hand, debating what to do. Privacy was important in our marriage. We'd always respected each other's space. But the name on that screen. I tried a few password combinations before entering Emma's birthday, June 12, 13. The phone unlocked. What I found shattered my world in an instant. Years of text messages, exchanged with a man named Michael. Photos of them together in places I'd never been, a cabin in Wisconsin, a beach in Florida, restaurants across Chicago. Dates on those photos corresponded with times Rebecca had told me she was visiting her sister or attending art workshops. But it was the messages that truly broke me. "James is working late again. Come over. He's so clueless. Thinks I'm actually proud of his promotion. Just a few more years. Once the house is paid off and Emma's trust fund is set up, I'll file for divorce. In Illinois, I'll get half of everything. We'll have enough to live comfortably without ever working again. Just be patient, baby. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. The timestamps showed these conversations had been going on for at least 5 years. 5 years of lies. 5 years of plotting. Michael, don't you feel bad sometimes? Rebecca, why should I? He's never here anyway. He chose his career over us. I'm just making sure Emma and I get what we deserve. I scrolled through more exchanges, each one driving the knife deeper. He's opening a new investment account for Emma's college. I made sure my name is on it too. Just convinced him to take out a life insurance policy. $2 million, with me as the sole beneficiary. He thinks I'm redecorating the house because I love it here. If he only knew I'm increasing its value for when we sell it after the divorce. There were even messages from earlier that day. Michael, how was the recital? Rebecca, fine. James actually showed up for once. Probably because I guilt him about missing the last few. Michael, did he suspect anything? Rebecca, please. He's too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice what's right in front of him. I sat down on an old lawn chair, my legs too weak to hold me. Outside, I could hear neighborhood kids playing, the sound of a lawnmower, life continuing as normal while mine imploded. My first instinct was to confront her immediately. To call her, scream, demand explanations. But as the initial shock began to fade, another part of my brain, the analytical, strategic part that made me good at my job, took over. If I confronted her now, she'd know I'd found the phone. She'd change her plans, maybe accelerate the divorce timeline before I could protect myself. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I carefully placed the phone back in the handbag, exactly where I'd found it. Then I finished cleaning the garage as if nothing had happened. When Rebecca returned with Emma, I greeted them with a smile that felt foreign on my face. How was the party, princess? I asked Emma, hugging her tight. So fun. They had a magician and everything. Rebecca touched my arm. You look tired. Garage wore you out. I nodded. Just dusty. Think I'll take a shower. Under the hot water, I let the tears come. 12 years of marriage. A child together. All of it built on lies. But crying wouldn't solve anything. I needed a plan. The next morning, I told Rebecca I had to go to the office for a few hours. Instead, I drove to meet with Alan Cooper, a college friend who had become one of Chicago's top divorce attorneys. This is quite a situation, James, Alan said after I'd laid out everything I'd discovered. The good news is Illinois courts take infidelity into consideration. The bad news is, without proper documentation, it becomes your word against hers. So what do I do? First, we document everything. You need to make copies of all financial records, investment accounts, property deeds, insurance policies, anything that shows what assets you have and how they were acquired. And the phone? Her messages. Alan leaned forward. That's trickier. Accessing someone else's private communications without permission is legally problematic. But now that you know it exists, we can potentially subpoena those records during discovery. Over the next few weeks, I lived a double life. At home, I was the same workaholic husband, coming home late, discussing renovation plans with Rebecca, helping Emma with homework when I could. But in secret, I was methodically preparing for war. I opened new accounts at different banks and began slowly transferring funds, not everything, which would raise red flags, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be left penniless if Rebecca made her move. I changed my will, making Emma the beneficiary of my estate with my brother Thomas as the trustee until she turned 25. I documented every asset I'd brought into the marriage and every dollar I'd earned since. I kept copies of Rebecca's text messages to Michael, date-stamped and backed up in multiple locations. I even hired a private investigator to document their affair, providing times and locations based on what I'd seen in the messages. The PI returned with dozens of photos, Rebecca and Michael entering hotels, sharing intimate dinners, holding hands in parks, all while I was working to build what I thought was our future. The hardest part was maintaining the facade at home. Each time Rebecca kissed me goodbye or asked about my day, I felt sick with the knowledge of her betrayal. When she suggested we increase her spending allowance for household expenses, I agreed while knowing the money was likely funding her rendezvous with Michael. I watched her closely and began to see the signs I'd missed before. How she always placed her phone face down. The girls' nights that left her coming home with no shopping bags. The way she sometimes looked at me with what I now recognized as contempt rather than concern when I worked late. 6 months passed this way. Our wedding anniversary was approaching, 15 years together. Rebecca had been hinting she wanted to celebrate somewhere special. "Let's go to that new restaurant downtown," she suggested one night as we got ready for bed. "The one with the rooftop view. I've been dying to try it." "That sounds perfect," I said, kissing her cheek. 15 years deserves something special. What she didn't know was that I had already made reservations, not at a restaurant, but at Alan Cooper's office. The night of our anniversary, I dressed in my best suit. Rebecca wore a black dress I'd never seen before. "You look beautiful," I told her, and it wasn't a lie. She was as stunning as the day I'd met her, which somehow made her betrayal cut even deeper. "Thank you," she smiled, adjusting my tie. "You're not so bad yourself, when you actually dress up." We got into my car, and I started driving downtown. "So, where exactly is this place?" she asked after a while, looking at the unfamiliar route. "It's a surprise," I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. When I pulled into the parking garage of an office building instead of a restaurant, Rebecca laughed. "James, please tell me you're not taking me to your office for our anniversary." "Not my office," I said, turning off the engine. "Someone else's." Her confusion was evident as I led her to the elevator and pressed the button for the 12th floor. As we walked down the hallway to Alan's suite, she grew quiet. "James, what's going on?" I stopped at the door, which had "Cooper Legal Services" etched in gold letters. "Rebecca," I said, finally meeting her eyes directly, "there's something we need to discuss." Her face paled. "A lawyer? On our anniversary? What is this?" "Please, just come inside." Alan was waiting in the conference room, along with his paralegal who would serve as a witness. On the polished mahogany table lay several stacks of documents. Financial statements. Photos from the private investigator. Printouts of text messages. Divorce papers. Rebecca's eyes darted from the documents to my face. "What is all this?" "Sit down," I said quietly. She remained standing. "I'm not doing anything until you explain what's happening." I picked up my phone and pulled up a photo I'd taken, her secret phone, unlocked, displaying her messages to Michael. "You left your other phone in your old handbag." "In the garage." The color drained from her face. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "You went through my private things." Her voice shook with indignation, but I could see the fear behind it. "That's what you're concerned about? Privacy? After planning to take everything from me for years?" She shifted strategies instantly, tears welling in her eyes. "James, I can explain. It's not what you think. Michael is just..." "Stop," I held up my hand. "I've read everything, Rebecca. Every message. Every plan to wait until I'd built enough wealth for you to take half. Every lie." She sank into the chair, her mind visibly racing for a way out. "These," I gestured to the papers on the table, our divorce filings. I'm not contesting that you get your legal share of our marital assets. But there's something you should know. I slid another document toward her, a financial statement showing significantly less money than she likely expected. Where's everything else? She demanded, flipping through the pages. The investment accounts? The property in Lake Forest? Legally transferred or protected, Alan interjected smoothly. Mr. Sanders has been meticulous about separating individual assets from marital property. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. You can't do that. I'm entitled to half of everything. Half of our marital assets, yes, I agreed. But the court considers several factors, including length of marriage, contribution to marital property, and conduct during the marriage. I tapped the photos of her with Michael. This changes the equation considerably. She stood suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. You can leave, I said, but these papers will still be filed tomorrow. And Rebecca? Don't go home. What? The house is in my name. It was purchased with inheritance money from my father, which is protected as individual property. You have until tomorrow to collect your personal belongings. My brother will be there to supervise. Her facade finally cracked. Where am I supposed to go? She hissed. I'm sure Michael has room, I replied evenly. Though I should mention, he's received copies of these documents too. Including the parts where you referred to him as your meal ticket once the divorce is final. I wonder if he'll still want you without my money attached. The look she gave me was pure hatred. What about Emma? You think she'll forgive you for this? It was the one barb that could still hurt me. Emma will stay with me while this is resolved. The court will determine final custody arrangements. She'll hate you when she learns what you've done. I shook my head sadly. What I've done? I'm not the one who betrayed our family, Rebecca. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Alan looked at me sympathetically. That went about as well as could be expected. I sat heavily in the chair Rebecca had vacated. What happens now? Now we file the paperwork and let the legal process unfold. It won't be pleasant, James. She'll fight. I know. But at least now I'm prepared. The following weeks proved Alan right. Rebecca hired her own attorney, a shark known for aggressive tactics in high-asset divorces. She claimed I had been emotionally absent, that her affair was a result of my neglect, that she deserved compensation for the years she'd spent raising our daughter while I built my career. But the evidence was too substantial to overcome. The judge was particularly unmoved by her claims after reviewing the text messages detailing her long-term plan to leave with half my assets. Michael, as I'd predicted, wanted nothing to do with Rebecca once he realized she wouldn't be bringing a small fortune into their relationship. He stopped taking her calls, changed his number, moved on to other prospects. In the end, Rebecca received far less than she'd planned, some cash assets, a car, and basic support as we established separate households. The judge granted me primary custody of Emma, with Rebecca having visitation rights. The day the divorce was finalized, I sat alone in my office, staring at the same Chicago skyline. I should have felt victorious. I'd protected myself from someone who had plotted for years to deceive me. I'd maintained my relationship with my daughter. I'd exposed the truth. Instead, I felt hollow. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, "It's done. Ready to celebrate?" I didn't respond right away. Was there anything to celebrate? A 12-year marriage destroyed. A family broken. Years of memories now tainted by the knowledge that they had been built on lies. Not tonight, I finally texted back. I'm going to pick up Emma. Maybe just have a quiet evening at home. As I drove to get my daughter, I thought about the future stretching before us. It would be different than what I'd planned, certainly. Harder in many ways. But also more honest. I'd learned an expensive lesson about trust, about paying attention to what matters, about the dangers of focusing so much on tomorrow that you miss what's happening today. When Emma climbed into the car, her face solemn but her eyes clear, she asked the question I'd been dreading: "Is it really over between you and Mom?" I nodded, watching her carefully. "Yes, honey. The divorce is final." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she reached over and took my hand. "Will you still work so much now?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "No," I promised, squeezing her fingers. "From now on, I'll be there for what matters." As we drove home, to a house that felt too big for just the two of us, I realized that while Rebecca had lost her calculated payday, I'd lost something too. The man who worked 80-hour weeks believing he was securing his family's happiness no longer existed. In his place was someone more cautious, more wounded, but perhaps also more aware of what really constituted wealth. The revenge I'd taken had been complete, but it hadn't filled the void left by betrayal. That, I was learning, would take something else entirely: the slow, careful process of rebuilding a life based on truth rather than illusion. Rebecca called a week later, her voice small and unfamiliar. "James," she said, "I need to talk to you. About us. About what happened." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied, the words coming automatically. "Please," she persisted. "I made a terrible mistake. I've lost everything. My home, my reputation. Michael won't even speak to me." I should have felt satisfaction at her desperation. Instead, I felt tired. "What do you want, Rebecca?" She hesitated, then, a second chance. I closed my eyes, thinking of the years we'd shared, the future we'd planned, the trust that had been irrevocably broken. I thought of Emma, who deserved parents who modeled honesty and respect. "No," I said finally. "But I will promise you this: I'll never speak badly of you to Emma. She deserves to form her own relationship with you, whatever that looks like." After I hung up, I stood by the window of my new apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The life I'd carefully constructed had crumbled, but from the ruins, something else was emerging. Something less perfect, perhaps, but more real. I'd won the battle Rebecca had been secretly waging. But the real victory would be in what came next: learning to trust again, to be present, to build a life defined by more than just financial security. It wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in months, I felt something like hope.